Hello and welcome to the Inns of Court Armoured Car Regiment channel. Today we're going to be covering the Squadron Organisation from July the 4th until July the 12th, 1944. Now again, this is a very short time period, only a matter of 8 days. However, it does show some of the instant lessons learned from C Squadron that had been based in Normandy since June the 6th, half of C Squadron I should say. So after the regiment's arrival in Normandy, those lessons were kind of passed on, and then the regiment and the squadrons were reorganised in a manner to take those lessons on board and carry them forth. So during this time period of 4th of July to the 12th of July is Operation Charmwood, which is the push on Caen, which the Inns of Court Regiment were part of. They did take part in that and actually did push into Caen by the end of the operation, which is quite interesting. So first of all, looking into the Inns of Court Regiment organisation. To start off with, the regiment headquarters stays exactly the same, with a headquarters squadron consisting of headquarters troop, intercom troop, admin troop and anti-aircraft troop, as well as the regiment headquarters. There are still 4 Sabre squadrons, so we still have A squadron, B squadron, C squadron, D squadron, but those Sabre squadrons have changed ever so slightly, and there's now a Matador squadron. So what had happened was all of the heavy AEC Mark III Matadors, which were the heavy squadrons or heavy Sabres assigned to all of the squadrons, were stripped out of the squadrons and merged together to make their own standalone Matador squadron. This is a subject of a future video, but it just shows that there was a change at regiment level. Going into the individual Sabre squadrons, so with the Sabre squadrons, the changes were basically what the Sabres were. So the squadron headquarters has a little change. Admin troop, I'm assuming, was the same. Support troop has a ever so slight minor change, and then the actual Sabre squadrons, or Sabre troops I should say, they were now split up into 4 light Sabre troops and 4 heavy Sabre troops, and this is basically the regiment taking on board those lessons from C Squadron regarding the effectiveness of certain vehicles. So the light Sabre squadrons consisted of 2 Daimler Dingo scout cars. The reason being is that from the lessons learned, these scout cars were the most effective vehicle in the unit. They were able to obviously push forward, feel out the enemy's defences and find ways around. And because of their speedy and small nature and their being the tip of the spear in the operations that the regiment was doing, it was decided to split the scout cars away from the armoured cars. So splitting the Dingoes away from the Daimler armoured cars in order to kind of have like a 2-step pace. So scout cars can push forward, find the gaps, and then the Daimler armoured cars can then follow up and exploit those gaps, or follow through, I guess you could say. So as I kind of alluded, the heavy Sabre then also consisted of 2 Daimler armoured cars, but also again had its own scout car, its own Dingo as well. So by having these 4 light Sabres and 4 heavy Sabres, you've now got your light Sabres able to feel out where the enemy's weak spots are, and then the heavy Sabres will then follow them through, exploiting those gaps and basically providing a bit of firepower, although the 2-pounder on the Daimler armoured car wasn't exactly that impressive at this moment, although they did have Little John adapters on them. When it comes to the support troop, the scout car from this has now been kind of stripped away and has been exchanged with a Daimler armoured car, as there's not such a need for the Daimler armoured cars in the Sabre squadron, but there is more of a need to have the Dingoes. So in order to make sure that they're not increasing their allotment of vehicles, there is a little bit of juggling around with some of the individual troops of the Sabre. So in this case, the scout car's been handed over to the light Sabre, and then the Daimler armor car has been, the spare one has been then incorporated into the support troop. Well, I guess it kind of makes sense, because you're not really expecting your support troop to do any kind of like scouting. You're expecting the support troop to almost apply pressure where needed. So having a Daimler armoured car does make a little bit more sense. The admin troop, I believe, stays the same, although there's not really any information on this. So I'm going to continue to assume that the admin troop stays the same, but it's always possible that some elements of the admin troops have been kind of divvied off to make an admin troop for the Matador Squadron, but unfortunately there's not a lot of information on the Matador Squadron. Squadron headquarters generally remains the same. However, in this case, again, I assume that the scout car is having to be handed over to the light Sabre troops in order to get the numbers up for the number of dingoes in those troops. And based on the reorganisation, there is one spare Daimler armoured car. So I'm assuming that it would have been folded into the squadron headquarters to kind of replace that scout car that's been handed over to the light Sabre troops. There's not really anywhere else I can think it could go. At least there's no record of where it goes. We know that a Daimler armoured car went to the support troop, but we don't know where the other spare one went. Apart from that, everything else stays the same with the squadron headquarters. 4 staghounds, 1 jeep, 1 staff car, 1 white scout car acts as an ambulance, and 5 motorcycles. So overall, the Sabre Squadron has had a little bit of a change. We still have the same number of Daimler armoured cars. The number of Daimler Dingo scout cars has gone down from 13 to 12, but that's because of the Matador Squadron leaving the Sabres and forming their own. There's also still the 4 staghounds, the 3 half-tracks, the 7 3-ton lorries, the 1 white scout car, the 1 jeep, the 1 staff car, and the 6 motorcycles. So overall, the amount of vehicles would look something along the lines of what we see here. So this shows the number of vehicles. So the total number of vehicles in the Sabre Squadrons has reduced a little bit, but that's more to do with the formation of the Matador Squadron. Moving on to caveats, I've kind of covered some of this, but with the... So it has been assumed that the scout car from the squadron headquarters has been reallocated to make up dingo numbers in the Sabre Squadrons. I've kind of already explained that. And it's also been assumed that the Matador Squadron would keep their scout car. So it basically means that that's why there's a reduction from 13 to 12 dingoes. And therefore I believe there's no... The only other option would be the Matadors didn't take their scout cars, but considering you're forming a Matador Squadron, I'd assume that they would have some scout cars to at least have some scouting ability. Now, based on some of the references, Needs Must states that the Heavy Sabre troops had 2 scout cars, whereas the Devil's Own states that the Heavy Sabre troops had 1 scout car. Now, Needs Must is based off of the collection of the regiment's diaries, whereas the Devil's Own is the Innscourt regiment history. However, in this case, I'm more inclined to believe the Devil's Own, the regiment's history, as the organisation of the scout cars could be done with the regiment's allocation, with it having only 1 scout car per Heavy Sabre, whereas if they have 2 scout cars per Heavy Sabre, it means that the regiment is going to need to source at least 4 more dingo scout cars per squadron if the Matador Squadron keeps their scout cars, or at least 3 more dingo scout cars per squadron if the Matador Squadron doesn't take any scout cars, which means that at such short notice they would need to acquire somewhere between 16 and 12 dingo scout cars at very short notice, because the regiment's only really kind of arrived over in Normandy, and they'd have to also try and get that allocation through the very restricted logistics at the Normandy beach. If there's some kicking around spare, then great, but I kind of doubt it. So I kind of feel like the 1 scout car per Heavy Sabre is probably a lot more in line with what the squadron would have done, because then that way they can keep the allocation of scout cars the same for the entire squadron. Other caveats are that, again, like I kind of said, is assumed that the Daimler armoured car that's left in excess to requirement as part of the reorganisation of the Sabre Squadrons is allocated to the headquarters troop to replace the Dingo scout car. And then, as I kind of say there at the bottom, all previous caveats from the Squadron Organisation June 20th to July the 4th are still applicable. So these caveats, I think the main one I'm probably referring to is the number of dismounts, which are as part of the support blitz troop. When it comes to references, I kind of already mentioned them, but there's Needs Must, which is by Taggart AF. It's from 1949. It's a very difficult book to get hold of, and will probably cost you a pretty penny if you do try to find it. But it is a very interesting book. It's a combination of all of the Squadron's war diaries put together and then laid out in a chronological order. And then there's also Devil's Own, which is the regiment's history. Again, a very good book. It's slightly easier to get hold of, but still not super easy to get hold of. But that also, it has the same kind of information, but it's very kind of slimmed down. It's not like a day-by-day, blow-by-blow account of the Squadron, but it does cover some of the main events of the Squadron, and it does cover this reorganisation, which took place on July the 4th. Well, I hope you enjoyed, and until next time, cheerio.